Any questions from the floor? Okay, gentlemen over there.
I would like to go back to the slide of the flume buildings that's in the lagoons. That he hadn't time to show us how the structure was tackled, if possible. Tower 29. Is that possible?
What is the question?
We would like to know how you tackled Tower 29, how the structure, how you went into the structure, the flumes, the 4 buildings that's going to be built in Dubai. If you can show us, if you have time, I mean, a couple of minutes.
Okay. Unfortunately, I guess I made a mistake by bringing those other slides, and it took a lot of time, and Mr. Chairman indicated that I didn't have enough time. I can respond in 2 ways. One is that it is well covered in the proceedings. If you are registered here, I would assume you will get a very nice read on that. However, I will take this opportunity to say the following, that we, like I was saying, we would try to figure out what are the issues of concern of this form so that we can try to develop a structure that works on it. A structure that fits within the architecture and not the structures that fall in, not the structure that takes away from it. It became apparent to us that the form has 3 independent movements. It has a twist, it has a morphing of the plan, and it has a taper. But there is one structural element, is not tapering, is not twisting, and is not morphing. That is the shear wall, the core wall. So we concluded that the core wall is the backbone of our structural system. And the core wall is also located within the center of gravity of the load, which a concern of this type of form, you would have a concern that, is this building going to be standing up? So we started from that point, and then we connected with the exterior cage, and we developed some series of outriggers to make the connect. And we took advantage of the atriums. We located the atriums with the architect at the places that we don't want load, and we removed them from the places that we want load. So we kind of tried as hard as we can to make things happen. This could have only been working if the architectural form is within a reasonable limits of a structural acceptability. And to our knowledge, or to our, I guess, joy, we felt comfortable that the architectural form as is represent that. So, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay.
1,000 towers that you were proposing for the next 10 years from 2010 to 2020. What percentage would you perceive to be in the Middle East?
The percentage in the Middle East?
Yeah, what percentage?
I think it was on my list. I don't. I will forget the figures. I'm just wondering who's going to use all those buildings. When I showed you the 80s, I showed the local booming economy in Houston. I'm not replying to your question. I'm trying to figure out something from the past. And I think that in the 80s, all the most advanced design and technological projects were found in Texas. All the Johnson Berge design projects, all the Heinz, the developer of the time, they were all in Houston and in Dallas. I don't think that at the early 80s we could imagine that this would end in 87. because for 20 years you almost didn't have anything happening in Houston, Texas in terms of tall buildings. This is just to say that I don't think that anyone can predict the future, and I mean certainly not myself, but from the past we can see that some booming places just suddenly stopped it. I mean, like the States, it stopped after the 30s. I showed the One Cheers Manhattan Plaza. That was the first major project in downtown New York in '61 after 30 years. So I have no idea about your question. I can just see that from the past we have seen booming places, and it just stopped for several decades, like in Europe also, but for other reasons. Because if we stopped doing tall buildings from the 70s till the 90s, it was not because there was no market. In Brussels, Belgium, where I am from, you have 12 million square meters of office spaces, which is a huge amount of office space comparing with a few cities in the world. We didn't build any new tall building for 30 years. We've been renovating them, we've been renewing them or rebuilding them, but not a really new one on a new location. That's what we are talking today, because politics was involved. So apart from the booming economy in some place, you also have some politics involved. And we can see here in Asia that politics for aspiration, I'm not talking about politics, but the good sense of the politics, to use your word, aspiration purposes, they are building tall. But the next generation of those political rulers, they may have another vision. That's what has been happening in Europe for 20 years, and we are going taller in Europe currently in this decade, but it may change again. So it is not an answer to your question, but I gave you some thoughts, I would say. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is for the first speaker. I came somewhat late, so I didn't catch the entire presentation. But based on what I heard, you were talking about the urban form and urban planning and urban design, that kind of thing. My question is, we have now many cities that are thinking of building new tall buildings in Europe, in the Middle East, and also in the Indian subcontinent, and also in the Far East. Can you sort of recommend some generic principles for cities in terms of how urban life can be improved in a way that the city is better integrated with the tall buildings and the people can have a better living condition and all that? I think you mentioned about the three-dimensional presentation of the cities. The old two-dimensional master plan concept is becoming more and more out of date, and people are looking at Google Earth and virtual Earth and those things to sort of get a view of the city and the tall buildings and all that. So my question is basically, what would be a generic list for any city in the world that will give us an idea about a better urban life that integrates the city and tall buildings?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and I'm glad people are concerned about the public realm and the design of cities beyond the objects that we are placing in these cities, because without the space between, we have very little. My reference to you would be something that I've been fortunate to be involved with, and again, I have lived in Europe and in London for 20 years. We have something in the UK called the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment. CABE is the initials. And CABE have published some excellent guidance. You go to CABE's website, and it is simply CABE's guidance for the design of tall buildings. Now, on the face of it, that might sound like, what are the issues with a tall structure? Most of what that is about is ensuring that when we put tall buildings in our cities, we put them in the right place, that they have the right infrastructure associated with them. And again, there are a range of guidance rules and kind of best practice design guidelines for the urban design. So my recommendation to everyone is go to the UK government site and look up CABE, C-A-B-E, Guidance for Tall Buildings in Urban Design. And I think you'll find that probably answers most of your questions. That guidance has been put together by architects, urban designers, politicians, environmental engineers, and a whole range of experts, so that the result we get from these extraordinary tall building interventions in our city serves the whole of the urban environment. So go to CABE, and I think that will answer your question. Thank you.
Okay, is there any more questions? All right, then I'd like to conclude this morning session. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good lunch.